is your relationship with time? Are you wired and tired, stressed and overwhelmed, busy and going nowhere? Or just want to scale your business? Welcome to Take Back Time with your host, Penny Zenker. Penny focuses on books, strategies, tools, and tips to help you work smarter and approach your time more strategically. As a result, you can have more energy, focus, and get more done in less time. Be more efficient and effective. Get ready to take back time.
Hello, and welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zenker, and I'm your host. And on this show, we are here to give you some perspective on how you can work smarter, and including in working smarter means reducing stress. And that's going to be the topic of today's show because, if we're stressed, we're not showing up for our time in the best way. And we have a perfect international best-selling author and fantastic guest. Professor Peter Alexander is our guest today, and he is a recovering, hard-driving leader. And we're going to hear more about that in a little bit. With over 30 years of sales, marketing, and entrepreneurial experience, Pete successfully battled the negative effects of stress head on and developed a program that's called Lighten, and that's part of the title of his best-selling book. It's Lighten Stress Relief Model that motivates his peers to take action in only a few minutes per day, because that's all we got, right? So his friendly and humorous demeanor and customized approach will relate well to you and also to his clients and really delivers incredible value. So you'll be able to get more information on where you can find him, his blog, and his book. Look in the show notes. Without further ado, Peter, welcome to the show.
Penny, thank you for having me on, and I appreciate the time of your listeners.
This is such an important time to talk about stress. I mean, we're in the midst of the pandemic. Some states are going to open up. I say that in quotes. Some already technically have. Some people are really into it and staying at home, and others maybe a little bit less so. But there's a lot of stress, no matter where people are, whether they're sick, whether they lost their job, whether they've bored and they've got nothing to do because they're waiting. Everybody's feeling it in a different way. So, before we get into a little bit about your background, what's your take on the stress levels that people are experiencing today?
Certainly, it depends on what the situation of the individual is. But I think overall, everybody's stressed because we end up, even if our own individual particular situation is not stressed, we have family members, we have friends, we have coworkers, etc., who are also very stressed. So it's hard not to let that affect us in some way. But what I try and recommend to everybody out there, especially in this situation, is that we should not stress over what we can't control. And quite frankly, this whole COVID-19 situation is something where it's the worldwide, the issue. We can't control the spread of the virus. What we can control is our reaction to it and how we deal with it. And so
wait, I want to interrupt you because the fact is we're all control freaks, right?
Exactly.
And we try to control what we can't control, and we can't stop focusing and putting resistance in areas that we can't control. So I just want to reiterate, what you're saying and how important that is, that's what creates the stress, is that there are things in our circumstances that we can't control, and we're trying to fight against it. Yes?
Right. And a great way to figure that out is to draw two circles. The first circle is what you can control. The second is what you can't control. And you list out everything in both circles. And then as best as you can, you only focus on what you can control. Because if you can control whatever that is in that circle, you will feel more empowered. And if you feel more empowered, you feel more in control. And guess what? Stress goes way, way down.
Absolutely.
It doesn't help us to split our mind share on what we can't control because we can't do anything about it anyway.
Wasted energy, right?
Exactly.
Wasted energy.
Exactly.
I want to point out, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, isn't there a third circle?
The third circle about, is it like what we would call the parking lot, something that doesn't apply to either two?
No, well, I would say it would be maybe what we can influence, right? So, and maybe you'd call that what we can control, but there's things like directly in our control. There's some things that we can influence. And then those things are completely outside. And I just point that out because some people get stuck in procrastination because they feel like there's nothing that I can do to control, where yes and no, right? There's that gray area where you might have influence and where we could still take action and empower ourselves to move forward.
Sure. I mean, those of us that are parents out there, if you think you can actually control your child, that's beyond hope.
Right.
But yes, if you can influence them, absolutely. I tend to keep that in the controllable aspect, can do something about it. So if you can do something about it, that goes in the controllable circle.
Okay.
If you can't do anything about it, so obviously something to do with if, your company's laying off people, that's not something you have control over unless you are in the executives that are making those decisions. So you just have to be able to decide what you should be focusing your energy on. And if you have no control over it or any influence on it, just put those aside as best as possible.
Right. Let it go, compartmentalize it.
Exactly.
And we're going to talk about a couple tips in a couple minutes, but I want to know, okay, what makes you the expert? You said recovering. So tell us, we become the expert because it's an area that we're, have had some significant challenge in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for asking. Well, I've always been a type A personality. And so I have been very, very driven even way back since I was a kid. But the effects of that really started happening back in 2008. It was a perfect storm back then where I had all these different responsibilities hitting me at the same time. And I ended up getting diagnosed with stress-induced diabetes. The problem is I didn't listen to my body about what stress was doing to me at that time. I just kept on plowing through and burning the candle at both ends until 10 years later, I ended up in the emergency room and then in the ICU for a several days stay with a severe case of diabetic ketoacidosis. And for those listeners who don't know what that is, my body was eating itself alive because of my stress.
Right.
And here's the crazy, why I say I'm the recovering is because here I am in ICU for the very first time in my life. I'd been in the emergency room with sports-related injuries or the kids getting into injuring themselves, but never an ICU stay. And so on the second day I'm in the ICU, my boss at the time sends me a text. Now, my boss knew I was in the ICU, in the ER and the ICU.
Nice. And it was a work text, get off your ass and get to work.
Almost exactly. So it was about 6 a.m. and you don't get any rest in ICU because they're always poking you. And as a diabetic, they were poking me every half an hour to check my blood sugars. And when I was admitted, I was an hour before becoming comatose because my blood sugars had skyrocketed so high and I was so dehydrated because of a project that I was working on that I was really pushing myself on. And so finally, after 2 days, the numbers started coming back down where they could read my glucose numbers, and it was coming down at a nice angle. And I get this text from my boss saying, you have a webinar you need to run in 2 hours. What are you going to do about it? And surprisingly, I didn't have my work laptop with me in the ICU.
Really?
I just had my phone. And so I started pushing myself as much as possible to see how I could rearrange it and do something about it. And at that time, the nurse who was on staff at that point checks my blood, and it was a 90-degree angle. And it started skyrocketing again. And she says to me, you realize that's what put you in this bed in the first place. And it was finally the epiphany moment. It was like, what am I doing to myself? And I realized that for the last, not just 10 years, but I had been spending the last 30 years trading my mental and physical health for my career and other responsibilities. Right. And I learned the hard way that if you don't have your health, nothing else matters. And if for your listeners who don't believe me about that, I'll suggest to them, think about the last time you were really, really sick, whether it was the flu or something else that happened to you. Did you feel like doing anything other than lying in bed?
Right.
Probably not.
Way.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter everything else in your life. If you don't have your health, and it's so precious, time, we talk about time in this podcast, that health and time are two greatest assets. And with health, in some cases you can get it back, but in many cases you can't if you've gone too far.
And isn't it true, like, that when we're under stress, right, there's a lot of people right now, myself included, like, I'm not getting the same level of exercise. I'm not in the same routine than I was because I'm sacrificing that time that I have to myself to work out, to be more driven or use this time, what I think I need to do in order to make up for the business that's lost, right, from the disruption. And I think that's a point to really address, because that's what happened for you, right? You sacrificed your health and had this. What is a tip right there? And I don't mean to interrupt your story, but I think it's a perfect timing for people who are in that cycle of sacrificing their health so that they don't have that wake-up call that you had.
Yes, it's a great question. So in terms of the process, it's first being mindful of it. If you realize, wait a minute, if you're telling yourself, I really should spend a half an hour going for a walk or something like that, that's the first step, because a lot of people don't even think about that. It doesn't even matter to them. And then the next thing you know, they're in the hospital or they go for a doctor's appointment. It's like, what just happened? So being mindful of that is first, listening to your body. And then secondarily, if it's just a matter of getting some exercise, even in a situation like this, you block time in your calendar.
Yes.
That's what you do. You just, as if it's a regular appointment, you block it so that your peers, your boss, whoever it happens to be, does not take that time. And then you make sure that you prioritize that. Because if you don't prioritize your health, nobody else is going to prioritize your health. You have to take care of yourself. It's the same thing that a lot of us have a hard time saying, okay, I'm going to take care of myself, whether it's physically, mentally, or I need to do something for myself, but then you feel guilty because, am I being selfish? Well, you just have to remember that if you don't take care of yourself, you can't be there for your significant other, you can't be there for your job, you can't be there for your kids. You have to take care of yourself first. And it's not a selfish thing to make sure that you have your health.
No, it's actually, right, if you flip it and see that you're doing it for other people, right? For people who don't want to do for themselves, they can see you're doing it for other people, because as a parent, you're going to be more patient, right?
Exactly.
And that's going to make you a better parent. As a business owner or an employee, you're going to be more creative, right? Because you're going to be more relaxed and have access to the space to connect different things. That is where innovation and creativity comes from. So
correct.
I think we kind of have to look at it like that. And maybe you have a tip or a trick that works for you. Time blocking is key, right? And we're talking about take back time and being more organized and disciplined. For me, I have to do it in the morning. It has to be my first thing. And the reason is because I know myself. And I know that if I don't do it in the morning, then it won't happen. There'll be all sorts of excuses throughout the day. I'll do it over lunch, right? And then at lunch, something else becomes more urgent or important, right? And I'll say, I'll do it at 4 or right after work, or I'll do it after dinner. And it never happens. So I know for me, I have to say, I do it first thing when I get up and kind of habit stack, So it's part of my get up, brush my teeth right after breakfast, go down and do that thing. And I've gotten out of that habit because my kids are home and everything's all messed up. And so I have to make that a routine. What is it for you? Because I'm sure you still struggle with that too, right? Because you still have that inner drive.
And so the number one thing that I do is I make sure, so my morning routine is meditation. And so I know that if I don't do my meditation when I first get up, it's very likely that it's going to get pushed off. And if it gets pushed off, it's not going to do me any benefit during the day. So I make sure that I meditate before I look at my phone, any messages or anything like that, because as soon as you look at your phone, boom, you're in work mode. And you're
reactive, right?
And you're reactive.
You're in reactive mode. So definitely email on the first thing and do that most important thing, like you're saying.
Absolutely.
That workout.
And, being at home now, another thing that is important is to think about detoxing from that technology at certain points during the day. Because if you're constantly on your phone, what's happening is that you're not giving your mind nor your body any opportunity for a break. And so if you can just put it aside, turn it off for an hour, Just don't be willing to not look at it. Think about what would you do if you had a long shower? You wouldn't have your phone sitting there because unless, I guess, if you have one of those waterproof holders. But the fact of the matter is,
come on now.
Exactly.
Really? You need that in the shower?
No, I know I don't, but I know a lot of people who they just cannot be able to put down their phone. In this society that we have that we're always on, that creates all these different stressors.
Yes, it does.
And so, it just, you need to take a break. And it's amazing. I challenge your listeners that if the next time that they have a call with somebody that's important to them, or, let's say they're going to go for a walk with somebody, to turn off all alerts, texts, emails, everything, and not look at anything else other than the other individual as you're talking. You'll be amazed at how much more present you will be in that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I took you away from your story. Is there anything else that you wanted to come back to around your story before we go into some of the tips in your book?
Yeah. So what I did was, after I had that epiphany moment in the hospital, thanks to that nurse, I decided, you know what? I looked at my finances and I said, I can do this. I decided my health wasn't worth it. I resigned from my job and I started applying the different stress relief tools and techniques that I started finding and people were recommending. And I noticed that a lot of them were working. And I started seeing not only that my stress was going down, my glucose numbers as a diabetic was going down, my weight was going down, and my energy was going way, way up. So what a couple of my friends told me is, you really should write a book. And so I thought, you know what, I'll do that. And so I wrote the book, and I didn't realize how popular it was going to be because it fit a perfect niche. Because all the other books out there were saying, okay, here's a 300-page book on meditation or a 300-page book on deep breathing or yoga or whatever. And the reality is, most of us in our day, we only have a few minutes that we can try some technique to calm us down.
Right.
And so that's what the book is all about. Try something.
You mean most people don't have time to meditate for 3 hours a day?
No, not at all. Now, if they can get even 5 minutes, it's great.
Right.
But, that's the thing. It's like the 5 minutes or less. And what I was hearing mostly was, I've got to have this important conversation, or I'm going into this important meeting, or I've got this important presentation. I got 5 minutes. What can I do to calm myself down? Mm-hmm. And so what's great about it is you only invest 5 minutes or less in trying it. If it works, fantastic. Keep doing it. If it doesn't work, try something else until you find something that works for you. And that's the key, is not every technique will work for everybody. You find what works for you and you apply it.
Absolutely.
Distractions are the enemy of productivity. Go to distractionquiz.com and find out your distraction profile. Are you a time zombie or a hamster? Take this free distraction quiz today to rate your ability to focus on what keeps you from being a wizard. Go to distractionquiz.com.
You've written the book. You've got this model, right? So we had said that, why don't you tell us briefly what each of the letters represents so that the audience can get an idea of what's in your book? And then we had said we were going to just focus on a couple of tips.
Sure. So it's Lighten. So Lighten, 7 letters. That's an acronym. And the L stands for livelihood or your career, which, for all of us, that could, if we're workaholics, we're going to spend more time on our careers than just about anything else. Then the I stands for imagination, and that's your conscious mind. It's 5% of your brain. It's where your inner critic lives. So for all of us who have our inner critic, and we were talking about the control freak, that's where it lives. So it's quite important to make sure to handle that. So then the G, I call your genius. That's your unconscious mind. And your unconscious mind is the other 95% of your brain. And it's where your memories are stored. It's where your habits are formed. And it's where real change happens, because you have to change the unconscious mind. Your conscious mind will say, well, you know what, I want to go in this direction. If your unconscious mind is not on board, you're going to go in the direction of wherever the unconscious is. So you need to make sure to be in touch with your unconscious mind. So then the H stands for health, physical health. We've talked about that at length. And then T is like your podcast. It's for time, because time, we only have a limited amount of it. We better use it wisely because we don't get it back. E stands for your environment, because your environment needs to be supportive of your stress relief efforts. And then the N stands for your network of relationships, whether that be your friends, family, coworkers, etc. Your spouse or other person that's important to you in your life.
Awesome, right? And each one of those play an important role to our physical and mental health, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the book, what I did was I organized it so that the tips fall into those different categories, although the certain tips can fit multiple categories. But wherever it felt most common, that's where I put it in that chapter.
Okay, great. So we definitely, I'd love to be able to go into each of those areas, but let's just focus. We have a couple minutes left.
Sure.
Let's focus on what's in the time aspect, right? We talked a little bit about health and some of the other aspects, but what are some of the tips that you have there under time?
Sure. So I've got several of them. A couple that I wanted to bring up for this. One is setting boundaries, because especially, when we want to feel like we're a good employee or a good volunteer, or a good family member, a good friend, we say yes to everything. And then we stress over how we don't have enough time to do what we committed to.
Right.
And unfortunately, this is especially true when it happens with the person we report to if we're working at a company. And it's easy to blame our boss, our employer, or our clients, let's say if we run our own businesses, or our customers for our work-life balance getting out of whack. But you know what? It's not their fault. The reality is, no matter how demanding others are or how excessive their expectations may be, we are in charge of our own lives. We choose what to accept. And so if we're overworked by our employer, it's often because we allowed it to get to that point. We didn't set proper boundaries. So
there's people, I want to interrupt you here because, I hear this all the time from people. And they say, oh, that's my boss. I'll get fired if I don't respond back to that text message at 6:30 a.m. Or, so what do you say to that?
It's a great question. So obviously, the simple solution is to say no to requests, certain requests that that are just going to suck up your time. But if you find it difficult, remind yourself that saying no allows you to say yes to the things that you truly want or really need to do. So for example, if it is your boss, you can say, maybe you don't say specifically no, but you can say, all right, boss or supervisor, whoever it happens to be, if I have to do this, here's the other things that are on my plate right now. Help me choose which one is going to be knocked off my list, because I can't do it all. And that's really, when you bring it up to your supervisor and saying, you have to choose which one is the priority right now, then they may rethink about it and say, oh, you know what? This really isn't as important as this other project that you got cooking. I need to get that. I need you to have that done first. So you help them help you.
Yeah.
So.
Totally. What I always say is that sometimes they don't remember all the things that you're working on. And so they're just going to keep coming and bringing stuff. And so it's up to you to ask that question. Well, which is more important, this or that?
Exactly.
And to have a dialogue. I don't know why, but it seems like people are afraid to have that dialogue. And so, or avoiding asking a question, having that dialogue. I say the same thing, is it's so important just to have that dialogue.
To address your question about why are they afraid to, it's probably because they don't have a comfortable relationship with their supervisor. And I get that. I've had some micromanagers who just were awful. And it is difficult, but when you put it into business terms like we talked about, they are going to respond to that, and they will understand that, okay, you're only human. You're not going to be able to do everything. So if you don't get something else that's more important done because they pushed yet another thing on your plate, it's going to come back to them.
Yeah. I think that also we don't have that dialogue because we feel like we want to please. We want to do the best job. We want to add incredible value. Most people are coming from a really positive place. It's just like you said, we're doing it to ourselves, right? So we have
Correct.
we have to play that trade-off. And so when you said boundaries, I just want to bring up one other thing is saying yes and no is a boundary. But a lot of people have difficulty stopping work, especially in this pandemic. I hear more people saying that they're not used to working from home and they're working a lot longer hours, right? And that they're not able to stop at the end of the day because there's just so much to do. And they don't have that back to that environment piece, right? If they're in the office, it's a different environment and they can leave one to come to another. How do you suggest that people deal with that boundary?
It's interesting because I'm hearing that a ton myself. The first thing that you have to realize, especially if you are a workaholic by nature, is that work expands. It will never all get done. There's no finish line. So you can always find more work if you look for it. So what this means is your decision to stop working can't be tied to your completion of responsibilities. So you have to understand that you have to learn that the inevitable, there'll always be something left that has to be done. And you need to be okay with that. You have to realize that, there's no guilt about not getting 1,000 things done in a certain day. You're only human. And be comfortable with stepping away from it.
Do you have a tip or a technique that can help?
Yeah. I love, there's one that's called end of day anchor. And what that means is, and I'll give you an example of how I do it with my wife and I. So she works at a local hospital, so you can imagine how stressed she's been. But she works odd hours, so she gets home at about 10 o'clock at night. And I'm working on, I adjust my schedule so that I can spend more time with her. My end of day anchor is when I hear the garage door opening and she's pulling into the garage. Because that tells me that whatever I'm working on, let's say I'm sending an email, I'm writing something, I need to finish that up.
Okay.
And so that's my signal. So for your listeners, it could be something like the end of day anchor is you're turning the computer off. You're turning your work phone off. Whatever it is, something simple that you get into a habit and could be a reminder that you just put in your phone that says, okay, at a certain time, this is the time that I need to shut down.
Right. It's got to be a trigger, right? What came into my mind is Fred Flintstone, right? When at the end of the day, right, the bird or whatever would blow the whistle and he'd be in his Yabba-doo mode.
Yabba-doo, and he jumps into his car.
So that's your garage door opening, and we have to have that trigger that says, what, like you said, whether it's the alarm or find something else, maybe that's the alarm that goes off is the Yabba-dabba-doo signal. I'm sure you can download that from the internet. It's got to be fun too, right?
It is.
I love that. I have some other techniques that I use too, and I wasn't thinking about that in terms of that trigger like that. So that's great.
It works good. And if for those listeners who are going to be back in an office, it could be, if they have an office, it could be locking their office door as they're leaving. It could be turning off the monitor on their computer. Whatever makes sense to them. It's all about the trigger that you're doing mentally for yourself, that that you've transitioned from work mode now to your own time.
Right. Awesome. Love it. So what other kinds of tips and techniques like that people could do around their time?
Well, I would say that one that's a big misnomer for a lot of people is the multitasking, because they feel like they're so busy. I mean, I'm sure we've all had those, asking a particular coworker, how you doing? And you'll hear them say, oh, I'm really busy, because they're not going to say something like work is easy and I'm on top of everything. They're not going to say that. They're going to say,
it's a busy competition. Oh, you're busy. You can't.
Exactly.
How busy I am.
Exactly. So they brag about pulling an all-nighter to finish a project because they have no time. They share that they don't have 5 minutes to think during the course of their busy day. Oh, exactly. Or they have to eat their food right at their desk because they don't have the time to get up and have a proper meal.
Right.
So what it is if you think about it, our success is not tied to how busy we are. It's tied to how much control we have of our time and how we choose to use it. So think about that.
I like that. So is that your definition of productivity? Could you say that again? I really like
Sure. So success isn't tied to how busy we are. It's tied to how much control we have of our time and how we choose to use it. So if we stop work,
So that's the area that we do have control of, just to go back to our control freaks, right? Because we do have control of where and how we show up for our time.
Absolutely. And it is your time.
Yes.
It is. And remember, if you don't use it wisely, what happens? You don't get it back.
Right.
So make sure you do. And so if you stop worrying about what other people are thinking about the hours that you work and how much is on your plate, you can refocus your efforts on using the time as effectively as possible. And if you do that, inevitably, this means more time for meaningful ventures. And guess what? Our stress will reduce as a result.
So is there a technique that helps me? I mean, I'm conditioned, right? I'm speaking as the audience in general. I'm conditioned to multitask and switch from task to task. Is there a technique that can break that pattern or stop me from doing that?
Well, you have to teach yourself. And one of the things that you can do that I find is best is if you find yourself that you're, let's say, on a phone call and you're checking email and stuff, is okay, if you're on a phone call, especially if it's on your cell from home, get up and start walking around, because that will get you away from changing your mindset to, okay, I got to be thinking about what's on my computer screen, but I also have to be trying to paying attention to whatever call I'm on. So it's a matter of saying, okay, I can't do everything. It looks good to be sitting there on the computer, especially like if you're on Zoom and you're doing different things. It looks good because it looks like you're busy, but the reality is you are splitting your mind share up, and the likelihood, statistically, this shows, there's research that backs this up, that you are far more likely to make a mistake when you are multitasking than focusing 100% on one particular task. So what happens is when you put a whole bunch of different tasks that you're just kind of juggling all these different things in the air, you're more likely to make mistakes on each one of those. And if you're making mistakes, guess what? You got to go back and fix those later. You might not look good to your supervisor or to your peers, and you actually spend more time on those projects than you would if you were individually focusing your time on them. So as best as you can, if it is something that needs mind share, focus on it, get it done, and move on to the next item.
So what I hear you saying is make it difficult for yourself to multitask.
Yeah.
Right? So put an obstacle in the way. If you get up and you're not there at your computer, well, now you're not in the environment and in place to multitask, right? So
Correct.
You're working on something on your computer, shut all other windows down, like whatever you can do to best take away temptation.
Yes. So like I used to do when I would be in physical conferences, what I would do is I'd sit down at the conference table and, we'd have X number of people around the table. I'd have my computer in case somebody asked me for something that I need to reference. I would just close it so it's not there making any noise. The sound was off and it's closed, and I have to consciously open it up and look for something. That made me more focused. It's simple. And then don't have your phone sitting there right on the table where you can see every text coming in. At least turn it over so that it's not as distracting.
Absolutely. And by the way, for everybody who's listening, that's the same in the car, because just as much that you want to do that while you're sitting at your desk, you want to do it while you're at the car. I did a test between my home and my kids' school, and I had this urge to pick up my phone 8 times in this 5-minute window. So again, we just have to make it difficult for ourselves and put it out of reach and make it so that we don't have access to it.
That's a huge safety one. I mean, the smartphones of today allow you to put it in driving mode, where if somebody texts you, it can automatically reply back that, hey, I'm driving right now. I'll get back to you as soon as I'm not behind the wheel anymore. And for me, it happened. I came very close when I first started texting and driving. It was actually an email I got from my boss. I went, I better respond to this. And I was in bumper-to-bumper traffic. And so you're going slow. I came within probably a half an inch from rear-ending somebody because I was responding to an email that could have waited. But that mode inside of me of being thinking, I better respond right away, it almost cost me a huge damage to my car and to potentially hurting somebody else.
Right. And it has cost people their lives. So that's another wake-up call. Even hearing that it happened to someone else is, you don't want that to be you, right?
No.
And it's not worth it. So So many, I mean, I could go on and we could chat all day here, but let's get people over to where they can find more about you and your book and connect with you. Where can they go to find more about you?
Well, probably the best place is just go to my website for a couple of reasons. It's PeteAlexander.com. So PeteAlexander.com. And what I
show notes for everybody, so they'll be able to link there.
Perfect. Thank you. And not only is there information on the book where you can buy it, but there's also what I encourage your listeners, if they like these couple-minute tips, what I do is I take one of the tips, one of the over 100+ tips that are in the book, and each week on a Wednesday, I do a new quick video and write up on it, and they can subscribe to that and get a free tip to try each week. I don't spam people. It's strictly for distributing those tips. So I encourage them to go to my blog and I don't even ask for your name, just the email address.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great. I mean, these are super valuable, just what you've shared here, right? Very simple, easy to put into practice, and at the same time, hugely impactful. So thank you so much for sharing them.
Oh, my pleasure. That's, what I wanted to do is I wanted to help others because, there have been too many cases where I've seen where people just do not take their health seriously, and they do not want to end up in a situation where you can't get your health back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on, Penny, and thank you to your listeners for listening into this episode.
And thank you, like Professor Pete Alexander said, thank you for being here. And what I want you to leave here with is I want you to think about some of the tips that we discussed here, or any tip that you might already know, but you're just not putting into practice. We talked about blocking your time for that time to move and take care of your health in the morning. We talked about making it difficult for yourself to do things like multitasking and things that you want to stay away from. How do you set up your environment and your things? We also talked about setting boundaries and how to end the day when you need to with the trigger, and also how to say no, or how to handle overcommitment and decommitting or dealing with some of those issues. So really, just pick one area that you feel is the most stressful for you and put in practice one of these tips, or go to Pete's blog, sign up for his newsletter, and find another tip that is going to be supportive for you. Because you may say, well, stress, what does that have to do with take back time? It has everything to do with taking back time. And so because when you're stressed, you're wasting time and energy in places that you could be using elsewhere. And also when you lose your health, as Pete had mentioned, when you don't have your health, then you're also not focused on those other things that you want to do. So, that's something that you have to make a priority. Make your health a priority. So that was a long ending, but thank you so much for being here. And my name is Penny Zenker, and this is Take Back Time. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening. Today's topic is another opportunity for you to put the knowledge you learned into practice. Tune in again next week for more strategies that will help you have more energy and focus to get more done in less time, so you can continue to take back time.